At dawn, Britain woke to a number that landed like a thunderclap: 670,050. A deportation total so large it redrew the political map overnight. Within hours, the plan was blocked, and the fallout exposed a fracture running through the state itself. This was presented as the largest coordinated removal operation ever proposed in modern Britain. The figure, 670,050, referred to individuals identified through failed asylum claims, expired visas, and unresolved immigration orders. Officials briefed that the number reflected years of accumulated backlog, cleared in one decisive enforcement drive. Supporters called it overdue. Critics called it explosive. Either way, the scale changed everything. The proposal was framed as execution, not rhetoric. Detention would be immediate, processing accelerated, removal scheduled in waves. Long-term re-entry bans applied across the board. The language coming from its backers focused on logistics, capacity, and timelines. No moral grandstanding. No campaign slogans. A blunt assertion of state power over borders.
Over the weekend, an illegal immigrant from Iran, who we believe came by boat, was arrested in the north of England on serious charges of terrorism. Since the speech on Monday, 1,000 young, undocumented young males have crossed the English Channel. Does the Prime Minister agree? Now is the time to declare the situation in the English Channel as a national security.
At the center stood Nigel Farage, positioning the plan as a final reset after years of drift. He argued that enforcement credibility had collapsed and that only an operation measured in hundreds of thousands could restore deterrence. The number itself carried the message. Small gestures had failed. Incremental reforms had stalled. This was designed to overwhelm the system back into order. Briefings described a multi-agency effort spanning detention centers, transport coordination, and rapid case processing. Support personnel would expand. Facilities repurposed. Military logistics placed on standby. Officials stressed the operation was legal, operational, and time-bound. The objective was clear: reduce arrivals, clear backlog, reassert control. Then came the block. Within hours, the plan hit a wall inside Downing Street. Prime Minister Keir Starmer intervened directly, rejecting the proposal in full. The language from his office was immediate and uncompromising. The scale was unacceptable. The framework violated legal commitments. The approach crossed a red line on human rights obligations. The rejection landed with force because it ended the conversation. There would be no revisions, no pilot phase, no partial rollout. The operation was dead on arrival. That decision transformed the story. This was no longer a policy debate between parties. It became a test of authority. Supporters saw a government unwilling to act even when a mechanism existed. Critics saw a line defended against mass state power. The number, 670,050, hardened positions instantly.
The situation is serious. The last government lost control of the borders. We are taking powers. The Borders Bill, precisely to his point, the Borders Bill is the first bill to give terrorism-like powers to law enforcement, precisely so that we can get in before the crimes are committed, before people get to this country. That's right. This is the most far-reaching provision ever for law enforcement.
Media coverage splintered. Some outlets minimized the proposal as theoretical. Others framed the block as a necessary safeguard. Online, the reaction was visceral. To many, the speed of the rejection signaled fear of consequences. To others, it signaled restraint in the face of populist pressure. What mattered most was symbolism. A plan built on enforcement scale had been halted by institutional veto. The message to supporters was paralysis. The message to opponents was relief. The message to the public was uncertainty. By midday, the country stood divided by a single question. When a state identifies over 500,000 individuals for removal and then refuses to act, where does authority reside? That question would move from briefing rooms to the streets faster than anyone expected. The rejection triggered an immediate chain reaction. Downing Street framed the decision as final, grounded in law and international obligation. Ministers stressed restraint, warning that mass removals on this scale would undermine Britain's legal standing and fracture social cohesion. The language was firm, controlled, and delivered with urgency. The effect outside Westminster was anything but calm.
We've seen a huge increase in the number of illegal immigrants arriving in this country, people breaking into this country. It's up nearly 50% in the year to date. That isn't acceptable, it's not sustainable, it's placing huge pressure on public services, it's placing huge pressure on public finances, and then we've seen some of these horrific cases, like this chap being charged in Epping for the sexual assault. It's just not a thing that can...
Within hours, crowds gathered near Parliament. What began as a visible show of anger shifted rapidly into confrontation. Protesters accused the government of surrendering control while deploying force against its own population. Chants hardened, tempers flared, police lines were reinforced as the mood darkened. By early evening, the streets told a different story than the briefing rooms. Bottles and fireworks flew toward officers holding defensive positions. Sirens echoed across Westminster as additional units were rushed in. Crowd pressure mounted from multiple directions. Commanders ordered formations tightened. Shields rose. Lines bent. Eyewitness footage flooded social platforms. Officers surrounded. Vans blocked. Protesters shouting accusations of selective enforcement and double standards. The images spread faster than official statements could contain them. For many watching at home, the contrast felt stark. A state capable of mobilizing force domestically had declined to activate its most ambitious border operation. As unrest spread, authorities moved to secure sites linked to migration accommodation. Hotels housing migrants were placed under emergency protection, ringed with police cordons. The decision fueled further anger among demonstrators who argued that enforcement energy had been misdirected. Border control remained frozen while streets filled with tension. Inside Westminster, ministers reiterated the line. The plan would never proceed. The legal barriers were immovable. The government urged calm and dialogue. Outside, the language of dialogue had evaporated. Protesters demanded action rather than explanation. Some called for the dissolution of Parliament itself. Others framed the bloc as betrayal. By mid-evening, reports emerged of wider disruption. Vehicles trapped, officers unable to move, clashes escalating across multiple locations. The situation felt uncontained. Commentators began using words once reserved for rare moments. Breakdown, crisis, loss of confidence. At the same time, a symbol hovered in the background. Naval assets linked to the proposed operation remained idle, docked, unused. Their presence amplified the sense of paralysis. A state prepared for enforcement had chosen inaction at the decisive moment.
So people come here in the back of a lorry or on a boat across the channel as an asylum seeker, and being softies, we say, yeah, okay, all right, you can stay. Now, over 50 people a day come into Britain because they say, oh, my uncle's there, my nan's there, my little kid's there. And so what's really happening is we let people across the channel. It isn't just them that come, ultimately their whole family.
Supporters of the deportation plan framed the unrest as proof of their argument. Public patience, they claimed, had reached its limit. Years of delayed removals, legal appeals, and policy reversals had eroded trust. The blocked operation became a focal point for accumulated frustration. Opponents viewed the scenes differently. They warned that the unrest illustrated the danger of inflaming expectations through hardline proposals. Mobilizing public emotion around mass enforcement, they argued, carried predictable consequences when reality intervened. As night settled over London, the confrontation evolved. This was no longer a protest about migration alone. It had become a visible struggle over authority. Who decides? Who enforces? Who bears the cost when decisions collide with public demand? By the end of the evening, the story had outgrown its origin. A block deportation plan had exposed a deeper rupture between institutions and the population they govern. The streets reflected what Parliament could no longer contain. The question now pressed forward with urgency. Whether this unrest marked a momentary eruption or the beginning of something far more enduring. As the streets cooled, responsibility narrowed. The focus turned squarely to the Prime Minister. Keir Starmer defended the bloc as leadership through restraint, arguing that mass removals on this scale would shatter legal commitments and expose Britain to endless litigation. His position was consistent. The system, he said, must govern the response. For critics, that defense exposed the problem. Authority had been deferred a process. Deportation orders piled up while appeals stretched on. Enforcement agencies acknowledged the backlog privately. Capacity existed on paper. Outcomes stalled in reality. Under Starmer, restraint became policy and policy became stasis.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is dealing with an illegal immigration nightmare. After weeks of unrelenting protests outside migrant hotels by furious locals, Starmer has come out talking tough against illegal immigration. He posted on X, "I am determined to smash the business model used by people smugglers, and I'm taking joint action with our allies to..."
The legal core of the dispute hardened. Ministers cited human rights frameworks and external courts as immovable limits. Each removal triggered review. Each review delayed action. Critics countered that sovereignty had been diluted by design. A state unable to execute decisions, they argued, had surrendered control without a vote. Economic pressure intensified the reckoning. Councils reported mounting accommodation costs measured in millions per day. Coastal towns faced strained services and declining tourism. Residents described a sense of abandonment. For them, the argument shifted from ideology to impact. Cost, safety, and trust converged. Public confidence fractured further. Polling discussed during coverage showed support for stronger enforcement, rising quietly while public expression narrowed. Many felt speaking carried risk. Silence spread. That perception cut deeper than any policy dispute. Starmer held the line. He rejected claims of paralysis and warned against force-first governance. Yet the images lingered. Police confronting citizens. Borders unmanaged. Decisions deferred. To supporters, this was restraint. To critics, refusal. By night's end, the question sharpened. Could Britain enforce its laws within the system Starmer defends? Or had authority become conditional on delay? That answer now shapes the future. Stay with us for clear analysis beyond headlines. Subscribe, share, and speak while your voice still matters.